Hello listeners everywhere. Welcome to the archive of audio antiquities, a voyage into the vault of wonders on the wireless. In a moment, Simon Exton and Ken Moss will be here to speak to you.
Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome back to the archive of audio antiquities. I'm Ken Moss.
I'm Simon Exton.
Christmas is on the way.
Woohoo!
Woohoo indeed. We are listening...
Jingle those jangles.
Quite. We are listening
have
to...
we been slightly festive up until this point, Mr. Moss?
Heavily refreshed. But to ease us into the festive season, we are going to listen to the BBC Radio 4 adaptation of Hercule Poirot's Christmas.
Thank you very much, madam, and a happy Christmas to you. Oh, thank you very much, sir. Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas.
Porter, sir. Can I help you?
Yes, you certainly can.
Which train, sir?
I want the Adelsfield train.
Oh, we'd better be pretty smart then. Number 7, sir. Merry Christmas!
This is a Radio 4 adaptation of the book first published by Agatha Christie in 1938, dramatised by Michael Bakewell, and first broadcast on BBC Radio 4 in 1986. 1938. Tyrannical millionaire Simeon Lee has been estranged from most of his family for years, but now, on Christmas Eve, the old man calls them all together once more. Unable to disobey, the children gather uneasily and wonder what their father's intentions are. Does he want to clear up past misunderstandings or cause fresh mischief? Before they can find out, a deafening crash is heard overhead. Rushing upstairs, they discover a body in a pool of blood. With so many possible suspects, it's lucky for Superintendent Sugden that the Chief Constable has his old
Molly
friend...
to his friends.
It's lucky for Superintendent Sugden that the Chief Constable has his old friend Hercule Poirot staying with him. It seems to be an impossible case, but as Poirot knows only too well, things aren't always as they seem.
Good morning, Monsieur Poirot.
Ah, good morning, Mrs. Lee.
It scarcely seems appropriate to say Merry Christmas, does it?
Not here, at any rate.
Well, they at least don't seem very concerned.
Who, madame?
Pilar and Mr. Farr walking down by the lake. She seems extraordinarily self-possessed. It's all very odd, isn't it?
What is odd, madame?
The way she turned up here, out of the blue.
I believe that Mr. Lee had been searching for her for some time. He had been in correspondence with the vice-consul at Alicara, where her mother died.
You know, Monsieur Poirot, there's some story connected with Jennifer's husband, Estravados. Something about him stabbing a man in a cafe in a brawl over a woman. He died quite soon afterwards. George feels the family ought to have been told more about the girl's antecedents. After all, if her father was a criminal... And the Spanish are cruel, aren't they? All those bullfights.
You are saying that, in your opinion, Senorita Estravados cut her grandfather's throat?
Oh, no, Monsieur Poirot. I never said anything of the kind.
Well, perhaps you did not.
But I do think that she is, well, a suspicious person. I'd better see if I can help Lydia in any way. I suppose we must make some attempt at Christmas lunch.
Dr. Exton, who's in this thing?
Peter Sallis.
Any other alumni?
No idea, I haven't looked them up. I've been a bit busy getting married.
Oh, yes, of course. Getting married. How was that for you?
It was marvellous. Had a fantastic day.
It was a bloody wonderful wedding. But starring with Peter Sallis as Hercule Poirot, we've got Edward D'Souza as Superintendent Sugden, Manning Wilson as Colonel Johnson, Cyril Luckham as Simeon Lee, Rachel Gurney as Lydia Lee, Nicky Henson as Harry Lee, Deborah Makepeace as Pilar Estravados, and Derek Guyler as Tresillian, the butler. So we've certainly got a couple...
Did he do it?
Well, tune in, find out.
Because we're not going to tell you.
We aren't going to tell you. With this one, boys and girls, it's an Agatha Christie, and we don't want to spoil something that is 90 years old, so go out and listen to it.
And an absolute classic.
It is, yeah.
I mean, I was going to say there are no bad Agatha Christies. There are bad Agatha Christies. This isn't one of them. It's quite a clever little story. It's what you come to expect from Agatha Christie. It's upstairs, downstairs with blood.
Well, as ever, it's a contrivance of either Poirot or Miss Marple stumbling upon a country house, being invited to stay for some extremely bizarre, flimsy reason. First of all, I loved this. The Agatha Christie stuff on BBC Radio is a joy to listen to, underlined in big capital letters. Listen to these. I've not heard this for a few years, actually. There are two things that leap to mind straight away. One, Peter Sallis
is not John Moffat.
He's not John Moffat. John Moffat was Poirot for the vast majority of the BBC run on radio. This is... I don't know how many Peter Sallis did. It wasn't many, was it?
I think it was only this one. Well, he might have done Blue Train as well, but...
He's badly miscast. Now, that is going to sound massively unfair on the man because he's a perfectly good actor and he puts in a good performance. But unfortunately, it's like a lot of other things. When you compare him to other people that have done the same role, it's very difficult not to compare. And
it's the Geraldine McEwen syndrome.
I purposely never watched any of the ITV Marples because they were never going to be Joan Hickson. Joan Hickson to me is the pinnacle of Marple. No one's ever going to touch her, so it's pointless even trying. I know that's very blinkered, but no. With Poirot, having heard the majority of the Moffat stuff first, hearing Peter Sallis was very jarring. Now, because I've heard this a few times, I can now sort of gentle into it and brush all that aside to an extent. But his Belgian accent phases in and out. It's not amazing. He puts in a perfectly good performance. It's engaging, it's listenable, but... it's difficult to get away from that Compo and Clegg Peter Sallis, Wallace and Gromit Peter Sallis. So it is jarring. What about you?
I agree. I mean, I didn't get to Last of the Summer Wine flashbacks from it. A little touch of Penley, perhaps, but not enough to distract. I just didn't think he did a particularly good Poirot. It's awful to say, but the problem is he's not John Moffat. And I'm so used to listening to John Moffat with all of the others that anybody else... jars. And it's no slight on Peter Sallis. I really don't think he put in a bad performance at all. He just didn't put in the performance that I'm used to listening to. And as I say, it's exactly the same as Geraldine McEwen when she started doing Marple. She's not Joan Hickson.
No, not at all. Which is why I didn't want to denigrate either Geraldine McEwen, who I think was a fantastic actress, or Julia Mackenzie, equally, when she took over. I just don't think that, particularly with what ITV did with the character, they took it and they thought, we'll introduce all these elements of Miss Marple that we've never heard of before, and we'll change the murderer in some of them to throw the viewer off guard.
And that's not what anybody watches Agatha Christie for. Realistically, Agatha Christie fans know what the plot is. We go into it knowing who the murderer is.
Yes, it's like, well, the one I always fall back on, When There Were None, which to me is the pinnacle of Agatha Christie. I just absolutely adore that one. You know it, but you still love it because...
To be honest, that one, I don't mind them playing about with the plot a bit because I'm so used to the film version where they niceified it so you have a couple of survivors rather than the miserable book where everybody dies.
Everyone
Spoiler.
dies. We have been talking for a good 7 minutes now without dissecting the radio version of it. Should we drag it back to Poirot?
Well, no, because we have been talking about the radio version of it, and it's what you expect from the BBC. It's a group of good actors putting in solid, competent performances. The sound design is good.
Now I was going to come on to that. Is the sound design good?
Well, I thought so, but you're more of an expert on this than I am.
Right, because it was only as I was thinking about what to say about this. There's bugger all in it. There is nothing. It's all done with words. And it's such a skillful piece of radio and such a skillful piece of writing that there's virtually no sound design in this at all. There's no soundscape, there's no incidental music, there's, the odd door opening, etc., but there's virtually nothing in it. It's all done with the dialogue, and I got to the end of it and I was going through the usual things that I tick off for these things, And it was only at that point that I realised how little there is in the background. It's all the performances and the dialogue.
I hadn't really noticed that, but then for me, music and sound effects and things generally stand out if they're really bad or jarring. But if they just blend in perfectly, I don't really tend to notice them, which I guess is the whole point.
Yes, it should be there to complement and enhance rather than intrude. And we have had a couple where it's been bloody intrusive.
Yeah. Or it's really, really, really good. So something like the Bartok in first episode of Web of Fear, or all that weird spacey music in The Web Planet, that stands out because it fits in so well. But then for all of those, you get Death to the Daleks and the odd clarinets.
Yeah, we've done a few things recently where the music has stamped all over either the visuals or the audio in quite a jarring way. The other thing that stuck out almost straight away, actually, again, it's a measure of the writing of the time. I know that you're going to leap all over this. The sexism. How all the young girls are. Oh, they're pretty young things, and oh, she's a bit of all right, and my goodness me, she's a looker. And it's very much of its time.
Oh, God, yeah. It starts off immediately where he's going onto the train, and it's, oh, well, you'll have to stand in the corridor all the way. But never mind. There's a pretty young thing. There's a
Would you
pretty
mind
girl
if I come
in
and
first
sit
class,
and walk?
minding your own business that you can ogle at the entire journey. That's bound to make her feel comfortable.
Would you mind if I came and sit in with you, my dear, rather than going into the dining car? A feast for the eyes. Me, the 13th Duke of Winburn. But that carries on quite a long way into it. What's his name? The old fella. He's unashamedly a womanizer his entire life. He's just...
Yes, but he's supposed to be a nasty old fucker, isn't he?
Yes. So that's
he's supposed to be a nasty old lecherous fucker. That's kind of a very, very big bit of the plot, so...
Yeah, it's just a pity that he's indistinguishable from a couple of the male characters who aren't supposed to be.
Well, the problem with this one is because it's all a whole load of sons that are getting together. There's a lot of male characters who all have sort of, hola.
Hello.
Very RP accents, and they kind of become a bit indistinguishable to the point where pretty much every line of dialogue addresses them by name, so you can tell who's talking.
Well, there's one of them, I can't remember which one of the sons it was, but he was so obnoxious that he reminded me of the parody Prince Andrew from the Windsors.
Oh, was that the MP?
Yes.
George, I think.
That's the one. So in my head, that's all I had all the way through. But, again, if you read Agatha Christie, or if you're vaguely familiar, every character in Agatha Christie really is a parody. Or done to such a caricature extent that you know very well what character they are, be it the local strumpet, the vicar's wife, the police officer, the police sergeant. They're all done in such a way that you are left in no doubt that that's what they are. It's Simpsons syndrome. The farmer would be a local yokel. The police officer would be well, come and take some particulars down, and then they're all much of a muchness. You know what you're getting with Christie.
Yeah, you'll get a posh bunch of people with their hanger-on servants who aren't quite as hide in the background as perhaps they would be expected to be. And then Captain Plod turns up.
Ah, so you're the butler, eh? Yes, I've worked here for 40 years, worked for the boy's father, and his father before him, and his father before him. I've known the family and grown up with all of them, sir. And yes, they are all the same.
Yeah, but the plots are generally innovative and clever and can sometimes be seen as cliched these days, but that's only because they're so clever. This is the first time they were done, and they've been repeated and repeated and repeated because they are so clever, because nobody's really done it as well since. Same with the Conan Doyle's, the mistimed death to give somebody an alibi, or the person who's still alive when you think they're dead, or the person who's dead when you think they're alive, or somebody alive pretending to be the corpse. All of these things which are now seen as really hokey cliches. This is the first time they were done.
Galloping as we are towards the end and the resolution, which we're not going to give away because it's just something that people should... We're not afraid of spoilers, but in this case, no, go and listen to it and enjoy it. Or read it and enjoy it. The plots of the Poirots in particular, are so convoluted that you just wonder what sort of mind came up with them. Now, this one is no different. The resolution and how the murderer is uncovered, basically, it's all in Poirot's mind. But it just happens to be accurate.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, he could have come up with pointed the finger of blame at anybody and made up a good story. Poirot says this, so therefore it must be right. Off with his head. And you've got some poor... it's just all a load of bollocks.
So you were there. You were hiding in the lampshade. So when somebody pulled the cord to turn the lamp on, you sprang from view and strangled them, whilst everybody else was downstairs, unable to see the light being pulled on. But who pulled the light? Nobody. You pulled it on yourself with a piece of string that you concealed in your nightdress, that you'd unthreaded earlier in the day, and that hung behind the door in a different room. It's so This is all made up, by the way, boys and girls. This is not in the plot. But the resolution of this thing is massively, massively... I'd say convoluted, but also inventive. It is fucking brilliant. I've heard this before. I've read this before. Because Every Christie is so similar and yet wildly different, which sounds bizarre, but go and read them if you've not. I always forget the ending of this one. In fact, to be honest, I forget the ending of most of them. I think you're a little bit more familiar than I am, aren't you?
I tend to reread pretty much everything that, or certainly all the novels that Christie wrote, about every 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, I do not have time for that. I rely on the radio adaptations these days, and it's so infrequent that I hear them that I completely forget in between. It's about 30 years since I've seen the Marples. My favourite of all, actually, I've said And Then There Were None. My absolute all-time favourite is 450 from Paddington. Nothing beats that with Joan Hickson. That one I do know the end, but that's only because I've seen it so many times. Favourite Christie?
Ooh. Oh, that's difficult. In terms of book, I've always really liked Cat Among the Pigeons. And I don't know why, because it's not her best plot. Her best plot is probably Crooked House. But Cat Among the Pigeons just gives me a sort of warm buzz as I'm reading it. A favourite adaptation? Oh, no, that is really challenging. It's going to be a Joan Hickson Marple. I'll go for one of the early classics, Body in the Library.
Ooh, good choice.
Although Angela Lansbury does do a very entertaining turn in The Mirror Cracked, and you have a whole load of classic-era Hollywood stars just chewing the furniture. Elizabeth Taylor and Kim Novak hissing at each other, and Tony Curtis and Rock Hudson being arch.
Yeah, even the David Suchet Poirots, they are still knocked into a cocked hat by Joan Hickson's Marple. And I really love the Poirots.
The Poirots are just a little bit... worthy.
It's been a while since I've seen all of them, but I do seem to remember they captured that Art Deco era very well.
Well, they did. And maybe it's just because the Joan Hickson's on the BBC. With the Joan Hickson Marples, the period details just seem to be done effortlessly.
It is true, and it's still true, that for all that ITV have got much better at it over the years, the BBC still do it best. I think the only pretenders to the crown would be Netflix, to be honest, with what they've done with The Crown. It's genuinely good atmospheric stuff.
I really must get around to watching The Crown at some point.
I honestly think that you'd like it. I know you're not a monarchist in any way, but if you divorce that from it and watch it as a period drama, I think you would really love it. Because it's certainly not in any way a how wonderful the royals are.
Oh, I have no problem with a fictional thing showing the whole load of them as a bunch of inbreds.
Reining it back in a little.
You started that particular bit.
I did not. I just said you might enjoy the crown. Should we rate this in earworms?
Yes.
This is the song that never ends. Yes, it goes on and on, my friends.
What do we think?
I'm not sure. It's as entertaining as any Christie, and it's well done. But it's not John Moffat, so it doesn't sound right. Oh, I'm torn. I sound like you now. 7.
I'm going to say it's a 7 from me as well. It's brilliant, but there are flaws with it. And the biggest one, oh God, I feel so bad saying this, is Peter Sallis. It is just Geraldine McEwen as Marple. That's all it is. He's perfectly good. His accent does waver a little bit. The story's perfectly good. The resolution's brilliant. The cast are brilliant. The way it's produced is brilliant. There's just something not quite firing. But I'm going to say this with all the love in my heart. There's been things that we've been a bit ambivalent towards. Anything Christie, you can take it as read. It's worth a go. It doesn't matter what we say, what score we give it. It's worth a go. Please go and listen to this. It's a lovely bit of Christmas listening. It is out there. You can probably buy it commercially or on...
I listen to it on Audible. I've actually got it on CD around somewhere, but Audible I can easily listen to in the car. Actually, my last 2 cars haven't had CD players, which has put a bit of a crimp in some of my listening.
It does make things awkward these days for people like me and you.
Actually, Audible is brilliant.
Oh, it is. It's just listening to CDs in the car. I'm lucky I've still got a CD player in the car, but I'm living in fear of the day when I don't.
And I listen to quite a lot of podcasts in the car.
And they'll continue singing it forever just because.
On the subject of which...
Yes, do you have a recommendation?
I do. I can't remember what I was originally going to recommend on this because I've got a whole list. And you'll be unsurprised to know that I have a spreadsheet with what the podcasts of the week are going to be. And I have a new computer and it won't let me onto any Microsoft documents. So I can't tell what I'd originally planned to recommend. So I'm going to recommend the thing that I've been listening to on my drive into and home from work today, which is Bad Gays.
Tell me more.
It's a history podcast about problematic homosexuals.
Okay.
They've done a very, very entertaining pair of episodes on Cressida Dick. The 2 I was listening to today, there was one on Ernst Röhm, the Nazi blokey, and one on Bosie, Oscar Wilde Bosie.
Yes.
Who seems to have been an utter dick.
Well, we've wandered down this route. Tell me more.
Well, for example, he went to visit Oscar Wilde and his wife at one point and got taken ill. So Oscar Wilde nursed him back to health.
Is that a euphemism?
No. He was ill and Oscar looked after him and got him back to being healthy again. At which point, Oscar was taken ill and Bosie fucked off to a hotel, waited until he was better and came back and as a congratulations for getting well, handed him the bill for his hotel stay.
Okay.
Selfish, entitled prick. I mean, I know that comes across in the film, and I mean, have you seen Wild?
No, I really need to get around to it. Is that the one? That's the one with Stephen Fry, isn't it?
Yes, and I think Jude Law plays Bosie, and he's an entitled arsehole in that. So yes, that's very entertaining. Bad Gays. It's a lot of fun. And they're up to about 3 series now, so there are loads and loads of deeply problematic people to listen to them dissect their lives. And it's done by 2 writers and historians, so it's properly researched. It's not just tip up to a microphone with a glass of gin and blather, because, there are podcasts like that.
Could you imagine?
With my reputation.
What were they thinking?
Bad.
And on that thoughtful note, what are we listening to next time?
Can't remember.
Well, I'll tell you. It's Doctor Who, The 10th Planet. The next 2 months are going to be Cybermen. We're going to do the BBC Radio Collection audio soundtrack of the television Doctor Who adventure of The 10th Planet. The last TV story to feature William Hartnell. And then we'll move on to its semi-sequel, Spare Parts.
Double woohoo. Spoilers. I'm quite a fan of both of those. So.
Yes, they're going to be a bit gushy, these 2. I'm sure there are faults. We'll strive to find them. And on that note, boys and girls, thank you for listening to us. We shall be back soon.
Bye now.
The archive of audio antiquities featured Simon Exton and Ken Moss, and the announcer was Jenny at Blue Box 99. All featured soundtracks are the property of their respective producers, and no infringement of copyright is intended. Title music was by Edward White, and the programme was produced by Maverick Productions. For more information, please visit maverickproductionsuk.blogspot.com or find us on social media.